Well, welcome, Lara, to another podcast that we're doing Beyond Sunday. How you doing?
I'm very good, and I'm very excited to be on this podcast today.
That's good, as always. As recently tradition, we've got our teas. It's a little bit of a ching ching. We're drinking chamomile today,
Yes.
what are you saying?
I will not be drinking the rest of my cup.
No, this is not bad. I think if you make it too weak, you don't get the flavor. This is actually.
No,
Do you want to
it
compare?
tastes like. Ugh. Okay, let me try yours.
Okay,
which
drink
is
out of that side.
stronger.
Don't drink out of this side.
Okay.
Come on, that is better. No? Oh, wow. Look at that facial expression. That's awful. You can't.
I know you like these
It's
different
surprising,
flavors,
though.
but I'll stick to vanilla and rooibos.
It's surprising that I like this flavor. Let's be honest. There's not many flavors that I haven't
You have
had.
a much wider palate.
For tasting for tasting the ground, like the ginger and all that stuff. Yeah, no, you guys
Yes.
don't enjoy that. Don't dig that. Well, today we want to talk about the role of sort of social justice or uplifting the poor, the most vulnerable, within the community and within the church, and it's just seeing God's heart for upliftment and caring about people who are, I don't want to say less fortunate, but have suffered in many ways, either through things happening to them or them being sort of part of the reason why it's happening. But we're looking at sort of God's heart for the most vulnerable, and what is the church's role to uplift people in its community. I think there's been a huge move in the last maybe 30 years towards what is called social justice. And a lot of churches have almost taken on this mantle to go like, we are a social justice, social, like there's a term called social gospel. Like if you're not serving the poor, you're not actually being a church. And I always pushed back against that slightly because I think that the church's mandate is not social. The church's mandate is to disciple people and to win the lost and to be the family of God. However, one of the expressions of that leads to caring for those who are vulnerable and to, like even in the New Testament, it talks about, hey, first look after those in your community, then look after those outside of the community, outside of the church community. But we can see throughout the scriptures that God's heart is to look after those that other people forget, the downtrodden and all of that. And so just kind of frame our conversation. Why is that important for us as a church? And also, what role do we play in that? And what is God sort of asking or expecting or commanding us to do as a result? Because we can't fix all the problems, but we do need to be part of the solutions, right? So what are some of your thoughts?
I think that when God reached down to us in our sin, He showed us His heart of generosity and mercy and love. And I think that should move us to, first of all, spread the gospel, because that is the main thing. That is the thing that will last into eternity. And second of all, to have a heart of generosity and love and mercy. And I think if we really meditate on what God has done for us, it will move us to be merciful and kind. And it's so hard in our daily lives when we are so busy and we have such busy schedules to actually put a space in it for generosity. And what I do not like at all is thinking, oh, I should be generous, and then giving 2 rand to the people by the robot, and then feeling like we've accomplished our generosity for that week. I think that is so far from where we should be, because I'm not saying all the time, but oftentimes those people are not trying to improve themselves. They're just living day to day. And I think if we can put together projects, which we have with Salt, that we could uplift people so that they are changed, they can get to know Jesus, and their families can be changed, and then communities can be changed. And we need to make time in our schedule for that. Oftentimes we think, I don't have a whole Saturday to give. And that's true. I mean, we have Samuel soccer matches and we have things to do and organize. But you know what? Saying I'm going to reorganize my budget and I'm going to give this amount, and then Salt can do so much with it. And I don't want to just promote Salt. There are so many worthy organizations all over the world. But Salt does a fantastic job of upliftment and feeding kids. And I think if we can once a month when we budget, put it in our budget, then we can make a big change.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot, then you covered a lot, which I think is so good. And just for those who are watching and listening to this, like maybe they don't know who Salt is. Salt is our community focused ministry of our church that takes care of the most vulnerable in our community, which we would say is like widows and orphans, or at least in our case, there are like kids that go to school, they don't actually have food, they're hungry at school, and so we see that as a vulnerable situation, and what we want to do is make sure that they can eat something, at least have a meal a day, where then they can focus on their studies and improve their lives in that way and actually help. So it's like not being given a hand out, but a hand up, like lifted up out of their situation as much as possible, and giving these people the tools that they can continue to grow. So we run two main projects, which is the school feeding, that there's no hungry children that go to school. And then there's an Isidima project, which is about giving skills to women within the impoverished community to lift them up, like social, like practical life skills, and a couple of other ones as well. There's a few classes, financial skills. So there's a few classes that they go to in a group scenario, and it's all about lifting them up, giving them a place where they can feel loved and there's dignity and help. So that's what we mean with Salt. Like there's a ministry in our church that's directly focused towards those needs, which is so good. It's so powerful. But what I love what you said was that you brought it back to that, like the gospel centeredness of why we actually do that. It's because while we were far from God, God loved us and he made a way for us. And so that's our outlook to the community. It's not that necessarily people deserve the help. It's not necessary that that we have to have everything to solve the problem. It's in the same way that Jesus had a heart for us and reached out to us and came to us in our impoverished spiritual state, that the same call is for the church to go to those who are impoverished in a physical state, to help them. So it's always that generosity from strength into the weakness to bring strength, or light into darkness to bring back to light. And that's the motivation, right? It's not just about making people's lives better. It's a motivation that's what God does for us.
Yes.
And so we do that for other people as an expression of God's love towards those people. And everybody's valuable to God. Everyone is made in God's image. So, I've thought about this at some point. So the only reason that we are where we are is grace, really.
Yes.
It's by grace and God's grace that we weren't born into poverty. But some people are born into poverty. And I think we have a responsibility with that to not just use everything for ourselves, but to make sure that we are contributing and helping. We can't do something for everyone, but we can do something for someone.
Yes.
And I think that comes back to the gospel of, like, because we're so loved, we can love. Because Jesus, what does it say? I forget which verse it is, but he sort of not abandoned, that would be a wrong word, but he left the majesty of heaven and put skin and flesh on, to come to us. And I think that is the same theological reasoning and idea behind us going towards our community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we do quite a bit of work, and they do an incredible job. What is your favorite part of the work that Salt does?
I really love it all, but I guess kids are always close to our hearts, and no kid should be hungry and struggling to focus at school.
Yeah.
So I think what they do, committing to a school, they commit to 3, I think, but
I think there's a few more.
Yeah, committing to a school and showing up with food and filling little tummies. I think that's very valuable, so that kids can get the education they need. And in primary schools, they get that foundational education. And so they really needed to push up into high school and complete high school.
I mean, within our community, you wouldn't naturally think that people are going to school hungry, but it is the reality. You know, our community serves a variety of communities around us as well. The public schools are open to anybody to come. So the reality is, even if our kids aren't going to school hungry, someone's kids are going to school hungry. And there can be a lot of shame attached to that. But what we don't do is we don't just feed all the kids at school. Like if you forgot to bring lunch today, come along. It's not a lunch club, right? In that sense. No. I mean, these are vetted. The school vets them. There's a list of kids, like names that can actually qualify for these daily meals, because we feed kids in those schools every single day. Monday through Friday. It's a huge undertaking. It takes resources, it takes volunteers to make it happen. The logistics behind it is huge. And from what I understand today, we feed somewhere in the region of 230 to 250 kids every week for the whole school year. It takes a huge amount of resources to pull that off. And, you know, with more schools opening in our community, I think within a radius, there's 2 more schools that have asked us, that actually sought out our help to do the same thing within those schools, which is huge, because it's like, wow, the need is so great. How can we fill that need? And I think that's maybe whether you feel like the sense of justice, like this is wrong. And I think that's right, it is wrong. But the way that we right that wrong is by acting with love. And I think the difficulty can be, because, you know, living where we live, you're so always thinking, what about my needs? What about the increases? Food's gotten more expensive. Like all these things are happening. And I think if you're not a believer, I think your heart is for the poor. You know, if you stop at a robot, like you were saying, you know, you give something to be kind, or but at the end of the day, we don't do token. We do intentionality. And so it's about, what can I share with those who don't have? And it might not be a lot, but it's got to be something, I think. I think as a believer, like the call of God is to say, how's your heart towards those? Because if the situation were the other way around.
Wouldn't you want someone helping you to feed your kids?
Exactly. Do unto others what you would want them to do unto you. You know, and I think we can get stuck in a survival mentality, and I only have enough for me. But you know what I find is that God always provides for those who provide for others. He gives to givers. He gives to those who are generous, because there's a conduit, right? There's a flow of resources. And that's part of our stewardship, that our finances, our resources, they're not our own, they're God's. And we use it for our living, but we give towards the Lord, to the local church, we also give towards the support. I think what did you say? What was that term that you used? Like, it wasn't justice, it was what? Alms. Alms. No, not alms, but alms, you know. And that's scattered throughout Scripture. Any parts of Scripture that stand out to you?
I think I think it's in James where it says,
If you're pulling out James, this is like, just brace yourself.
is it there? You must correct me. Where it says, religion that God affirms is when you look after widows and orphans.
Yes. And that's a powerful one, right?
Yes.
Like, you can be, I go to church, I'm a religious person, although we don't want to be religious people.
Yes.
But if you're not showing that
Yeah.
to those who are vulnerable, weak and broken, how much is that really affecting your life?
And we have, just with the dynamics of our culture, we have so many single mothers who are basically widows. And they're trying to hold down a job and look after their kids and provide for all their resources, even though they're living in difficult circumstances. I mean, every mother loves her child. And we can dehumanize people. We can say, oh, the people who live over there don't feel the way that I feel. They don't have the emotions that I have. But when we actually get to know those people, then we can see we all love our children. We all are trying to do the best for them. And so I also love Isidima at SALT because they hold self-improvement classes for women, teaching them to budget, teaching them about hygiene, teaching them about safety, and rewarding them if they put in the time and effort for their homework and for using their own transport to get there. They don't get paid for transport. And those women so they're in small classes, and what happens is they become a support group for each other. And I've heard Carol, who heads up SALT, I've heard her say, I was a woman, speaking about the woman in her groups. I was a woman. I came to the city. I knew no one. I was supported by no one. I didn't have anyone to ask any questions. I was isolated. But now I have a support group. And then the women start caring for each other and uplifting each other. And when they feel supported, their emotional state changes and they are stronger members of their community. And in being a stronger woman, how much more can you give your children? Because I think, what would those women do if they were just weakened and their kids had to be put into social welfare? But now, being supported, being strengthened, they can make their families strong. And Carol has now started a prayer group. So, because it's not a prerequisite that these women are Christians who come into the groups. Anyone can come. They do an interviewing process to make sure that they're invested. But there's no religious requirements. And then these women are now praying and getting spiritual support and opening up about their problems and bringing it all to Jesus. And I cannot solve everyone's problems, but I know Jesus in my life has helped me cope with many things and given me many miracles. And so these women now can get their own miracles. And when I think about Isidima, what I think about is we are protecting kids because we are making their mothers stronger.
Bottom line. I think that's so true. And it's about, we've seen transformation happen. We hear testimonies of how women were coming in so closed off, but then actually finding a place of flourishing because they found a community that they can support with one another. They're getting skills and equipped. They're also, at the end, there's a graduation for those classes, and those who have been through the program actually get they can buy second-hand clothes at a really cheap price and then resell that so that they got an additional income. some of them get helped with some working and food parcels and work opportunities for training. So there's a lot of upliftment, and there's a lot of transformation that actually ends up happening, and the stories are beautiful. And it really is about a transformation over time. And you and I, we went to the graduation, was at end of last year, for one of those cycles, and it was just, you see that they were all excited, they were all buzzing to be there, thrilled that they're graduating. And it's just showing people dignity and having and seeing them respond. Not every story is a success story, but there are success stories, and I think it's just valuing the people that are in front of us. And I think it's absolutely beautiful, the work that's going on there. And as a church, that we give towards it, and many people in our church also give towards it. But what I'd love for us to do is to go beyond token and to keep being intentional. I think that's the difference between being being a believer where you're generous to people as a way of life, you're a servant as a way of life. But if you're not intentional, like it's actually in your budget, then it moves from, random to like consistent. We love the term random act of kindness, because that takes you, it's like you're actually off the hook. But when you become intentional about it and you go, this is important to me because it's important to God, and therefore I show it in my budget, whatever that amount is. I'm not saying but to be intentional, like I'm actually going to do something about being a solution in our community and uplifting people. And hey, these women, some of them do actually come to faith in Christ, and there is that's happening. So we're not just about feeding someone and ignoring their eternity. We want to tackle it from both. But even the scripture says, like, if it's in your power to do something for that person now, don't say come back later. Like do help them now, feed them. Like that's what Jesus would feed. He would do both, right? The spiritual impact and the physical impact. He would bring both. And so we can also do that. And that's why I like the thing of just being consistent. A once off, like intent. Like that's my theme for this year. Is like, we're not looking to be intense. We're looking to be consistent. And because consistency beats intensity over time. And so, hey, it might be X amount that you give or a part of, or buy food parcels or whatever that is, but it's your regular rhythm. That builds up over time, as opposed to I'm getting involved for once or twice in a year, And of course, that's a good place to start. But I think us growing in it is where I think we can make a real difference in our community. The people need it, but also we need it, because I mean, I'm so selfish. It's like, it's disgusting how selfish I am. And these things actually help guard against greed and self-centeredness. And it starts us on that track towards what Jesus said: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of it you are. And then love others the way that you love yourself. That when we look after other people, we're actually showing love for ourselves. We're showing love for God. And it fights off that self-centered greed that all of us, like, let's be honest, there's not one person on the face of the planet that doesn't struggle with it. And we all need the help to do that. And so I think that's a helpful guard against that.
And I think as well that we need to put things in our schedule, in our calendar, in our budgets, automate things. Debit orders are great, because life is so busy that a year has gone by and you haven't helped anyone. And so for me, it's very important. People say, oh, I can help out at church now and then, but a year goes by and they haven't helped anyone. So get into a team, put yourself on a roster.
There's accountability, right?
And then every 3 weeks, I'm going to help out at church. I'm going to build a church. I'm going to build a place where people can get connected to God and their eternities can be changed.
Absolutely.
And it's on my calendar. I'm on a roster, and this is what I do.
Absolutely.
And then at the end of the year, you can look back at what you've accomplished. And so I think also debit orders for salt, for like maybe, what is it, World Vision? iVision.
There's a couple of organizations.
There's a couple of good organizations out there, but of course we love Salt.
Yeah, we would focus on Salt. We would encourage people to give
Yes.
towards that where they can,
Yes.
because it's, again, the local community. But there are others,
Yeah.
Compassion International, that look
Yeah.
after orphans throughout
Yeah.
the world.
So then if it's a debit order, it happens, you know it's going off, you're not using that money, you've budgeted it, you've set it aside, and then at the end of the year you look back and you say, I gave so much money away. Because life is busy. If you're just leaving it to chance, if you just, I must remember it on the 15th or whichever date you do your payments, then it doesn't get done.
And the crazy thing is, to feed a child for a month would cost you 150 Rand about.
Yes.
I mean, you're not going to feed your own kids for 150 Rand a month. So Salts are really thrifty around it, really getting and obviously because you're cooking it in bulk or making food in bulk, it helps on the price. But for 150 Rand a month, you can make sure that a child doesn't go hungry at school.
Yes.
And that's within reach. But say, for instance, it's not within reach for you, but you've got time. Or you can actually go and help in the schools once a week. Pick a day in the week that and then get involved in actually making the food for kids. So there is a practical, I don't have money, but I got time.
Yes.
If I don't have time, well, then I can use money. Or in your group, your group, your community group gets together and says, okay, we're going to sponsor X amount of kids every month for this year.
Yes.
And you don't have to go into eternity with that, but like set aside. And I would say that for most people, once you start helping in that area, you never want to take it away because you can see the impact that it has and the difference it's making in the lives of those children or in the lives of the woman. And so, I think you're right. I think automating what's important is actually just an easy way to make sure that what is most important gets done and gets helped.
Yes.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. I must confess, maybe looking at it at a bit of a worldly level, that many years ago I would have probably been more less compassionate, I think, to the needs of people in our community, because you don't know the people, and then this almost self-righteousness comes on you where like, I work hard for where I am. And that's true. Like, people do work hard for where they are, but how many of us have experienced that, living in that kind of situation and then going, I'm going to get myself out of this? I don't think it's as easy as what we think it is. I think there's a deep mindset that has to be changed, and that's hard. And that's part of the work that the team are doing, is to change the mindset from worthless to worthwhile. Like, you're a person. And I think just understanding that, hey, we need to deploy compassion and empathy and go flip, like, people actually need to do something on their side, but there's something on our side that we maybe need to do first, that people will respond to, go, okay, if they believe in us this much, then we can get out of this situation. And that is also how the gospel works, right? We can't save ourselves. We needed God to deploy compassion to us, his kindness to us, so that we could respond. And that's why I feel like a deeper, more maybe more empathy towards people who are in those vulnerable situations. You think, wow, why did I receive the grace to be where I am and not others? It's a difficult question to wrestle with, but I think as the church, it's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is winning people to Christ and discipling people. But an expression of it is generosity to those who are the most vulnerable within our community, to show them the love of God,
And I think we've all been taken advantage of by someone.
True.
And it just makes us less compassionate. But what I love about, okay, maybe I don't have the strength to help someone personally again, because the previous person lied to me and I couldn't judge what was going on, and I gave and gave and gave and they just ran away. Maybe that's happened to you. But what I love is that salt gets in there. They interact with people. They have no problem saying no. They are very direct with the people they deal with. They say, no, these were not what we promised. You cannot get this. And they also have a very big responsibility that every woman must be treated the same. So they're not going to give transport money to one and not the other, because that is inequality. And so I think to myself, if they can get in there, if they can interview women and see whether they're capable of self-improvement, and they can say no and they can say yes for the things they've promised to give them, then I don't have to find someone and try to judge their character and decide how I'm going to, lay down the law or not. But I can support SALT to do what they are so well trained and strong to do.
Absolutely. I think it's the most responsible place to give alms, because, if you want to give to people that are at robots, I think that's completely up to you. If you feel moved towards compassion, or maybe God puts it on your heart and do it. But for me, I think it's more responsible to give to an environment that's lifting people out than just sort of putting a plaster on someone, because that person's going to be back at the robot tomorrow. Yeah. Whereas with, maybe that's a super generalized statement, but I apologize for that, because I mean, it's not to say anything about those people, but I just think it's responsible to go, well, these people are being helped in a very structured way, and we're trying to minimize manipulation and increase the fact that the funds that are leaving your hand is actually being poured into someone else's life in a way that is sustainable, and a way that can be of long-term benefit. So I think, for if there was someone thinking, oh, but should I give to this or to that, I would say, give where your heart would lead, but in that I would first give to an organization that's making sure that something's happening, versus random giving that makes you feel better but doesn't necessarily really help the person. It might solve a short-term problem. So I think if you're already giving to an organization, then I think whatever you give at like a robot or just someone who asks you, that's like an overflow. But I wouldn't give there and then give nothing to an organization that's is just a bit more skilled in that approach. And I think that SALT is a great place to do that. But maybe if there's something else, there's another place that stirs your heart, that's also fine. But I think what we want to just bring the conversation to a close on is to say that while it's not the primary function of the church, it certainly is an expression of the heart of God and what we are called to as a church. Things will get worse if the church doesn't get involved. So, we want to be part of the solution, don't we?
Yeah. And I read a book talking about Christian history, and Christians were the first to start hospitals, the first to start orphanages, the first to care for people in plagues, even with dying themselves. And they were moved by God's love to love other people. And Christians changed the history of the world. Education, they always wanted to educate people. Their primary responsibility was that people needed to read the Bible. So that's why they started schools. And we have transformed the world with the love God has given us. You're right. I don't think we must stop now.
No, you're right. Like Harvard and all those schools were actually started as theological universities that developed in other ways. So he's right. I think I might have read the same book as you. Was it How Jesus Changed the World or something? And I was so moved when I read the one passage where they were talking about in Rome how people often discarded their kids at the city wall, and then the Christians would come and collect the kids and put them into orphanages. It's powerful. Like such selfless acts changed the world so much. It's beautiful. Can you imagine what we could do?
Yes.
With our resources in today's life? It's amazing to think. What would you like to see happen, Mrs. Steffens? Put on the spot.
I would love to see Salt grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and really transform communities in our disadvantaged areas. And I would love to see more families protected and more mothers protected, so that their kids wouldn't be orphans but could stay with them and be loved and supported. And so I wish we could just grow Salt so that they can keep making a difference, and that other people would jump on board and say, I want to be part of this.
Good. I think that's a great place to end. For those who are watching or listening, please feel free. I'd love to have you to like, share, subscribe. But if you want to find out more information about Salt, we'll leave the link of the website in the description of whatever you're listening to or watching. And just for the benefit of those audible, like it's www.saltprojects.org.za. And there you can find out all the work that's being done through our SALT organization. And maybe you, as a business, you can leverage your resources towards making an impact in our local community, or you know of someone. We can do more when we do it together. And so thank you so much for your time, and look forward to you in the next one.